welcome to another episode of Exploring the Bible. Today, we're going to continue to stand with God at the beginning of everything, watching as the earth takes shape, plants appear, and the sun and the moon find their places. We are no longer in that nothingness that was before the beginning of creation. We've already watched as God created the heavens and the earth, the outer shell of the planet. Inside the shell is still dark and formless and filled with water. But then God speaks for the first time and says, "Let there be light." And the light came on. And we could see now that the deep water is visible. But what's next? How does the earth begin to look like it does today? That's what we're going to see in this episode. Now, we pick up our story in Genesis 1 6 through 8. Then God said, "Let there be a space between the waters to separate the waters from the heavens from the waters of the earth." And that is what happened. God made this space and called it sky. Evening passed and morning came, marking the second day. If you look out your window, you can see that the earth is not filled to the top with water. You can see the sky. I want us to imagine that we are there as God creates this space. Remember, we have an aerial view of what is happening. God has created the earth. His spirit hovers over the deep water, and with the same booming voice that called the light into being, he creates the sky. The waters separate. Some remain above in heaven, and some shrink towards the surface. A barrier goes up, and the sky we see today begins to exist. We watch as the sky takes its place, not just as a pretty backdrop, but as a real division that makes weather in clouds and the breath of life possible. It's also the scene where the birds will one day fly and the rain will one day fall. In Genesis 1 9 through 10, it continues to say, "Then God said, 'Let the waters beneath the sky flow together into one place, so dry ground may appear.'" And that is what happened. God called the dry ground land and the waters seas. And God saw it was good. We are watching as the ground is coming up from the water. This formless, deep water becomes oceans and lakes and rivers. I can only imagine the ground slowly rising out of the water and settling into the places it is now. The shores are forming. The basins of the ocean are deepening. We are watching the birth of the land that most of life will call home, and the seas that will hold the other part of life. But for now, the ground is bare. It's just dirt and rocks. Nothing's alive on it yet. But don't worry, God is about to fix that. In Genesis 1 11 through 13, it says, "Then God said, 'Let the land sprout vegetation, every seed bearing plant, trees that grow seed bearing fruit. These seeds will then produce the kinds of plants and trees from which they came.'" And that is what happened. Picture newly created ground, bare, quiet, nothing on it. And then with the same commanding voice that made the light and the sky and the land appear, the plants and the trees just sprout up everywhere. To put this in perspective, there is over 390,000 plant species in the world and about 73,000 tree species known today. And we roughly discover about 2,000 more every year. All at once, every single kind of plant, known and unknown to us, just shows up. So that's over 400,000 plants that just explode out of the ground. Look out your window for a second. Any bush or tree or patch of grass you see, that just showed up in a single moment. God doesn't make something that's just pretty. He also makes the food bearing plants, fruit trees, vegetables, seed bearing plants, all for basic nutrition, appear on the third day. Creation is practical. God is providing. There's a tenderness in this provision. He's making sure that the world can sustain life. The plants are not just an afterthought, they are a part of the plant. In Genesis 1:14 through 19, it says, Then God said, Let lights appear in the sky to separate the day from the night. Let them be signs that mark the seasons, days, and years. And let these lights in the sky shine down on the earth. And that is what happened. God made two great lights, the larger one to govern the day, and the smaller one to govern the night. He made the stars. God set them in the sky to light the earth and govern the day and night, and he saw it was good. God said, Let there be light on the first day. And now we see him placing that light in its place. He puts the sun where it's going to give us warmth and it's going to give the nutrition to the plants that they need. He sets the sun far enough away to help us without burning us up. He gives us the moon, a softer reflected light at night so that it's not completely dark. He also gives us the stars to light our way at night. I live in New England and we have literally all four seasons. The rhythm of the seasons to me are amazing. We have the summer heat where we could go to the lakes or to the pool or hang out at a friend's house for a barbecue. And then that summer heat turned into the fall's crisp air and the changing leaves. And we see all the bursts of color, the red leaves, the yellow leaves, the orange leaves. And then winter comes and it becomes cold and quiet, becomes darker earlier, and we all drink hot chocolate and curl up inside, and the animals hibernate. And then spring returns, and we start to see the buds on the trees, and we start to see the flowers coming up, and we start to feel the warm weather coming back, and it recharges us. Those rhythms are a part of God's design, signs that mark the seasons and the days and the years. Creation is not random. It has timing. It has purpose. Even in these cosmic acts, God cares to reach down to our everyday needs. The sun is not only a distant star, it provides light and energy for plants. It warms our bodies and is a daily sign that things will continue. The moon gives us a gentler light at night, along with the stars. The sun, the moon, and the stars help us mark time. And if we're in the woods or we need help navigating, they're there to help us navigate as well. I want to share with you guys the reason I love sunrises so much. A few years back in mid December, we had a severe wind and rainstorm that hit my state. The power went out throughout the entire state. No power meant no heat, and in December it was cold. And once the sun set, it got really dark. During these widespread outages, some areas were prioritized, of course, over others. The areas that were more important were the ones near the hospitals and the busy areas in town versus where I lived, which was outside of town. My dad, who actually lived in town at the time, got his power back 2.5 days before I did. And when he called me and said, Hey, you guys can come stay with me, I had a sense of relief. I remember sitting in my kitchen the day that we were going to go to my dad's house, but it was still dark outside. And I remember sitting there looking out this small little window and waiting for the sun to come up because I knew once the sun came up, we could go to his house. The darkness, though, was so intense that the candles and the flashlights that we had could barely break through it. But when the sun began to rise that morning, My hope rose with it. Hope that warmth and light were coming, and that we had finally some place to go where we could turn on the light and have heat. That was one of the most beautiful sunrises I had ever seen. Even now, when the sun comes up, I remember that morning. I'm one of those people who like to actually wake up really early. I joke around saying that I wake up before the sun and the birds, but I love watching the sunrise every day. And I watch it out my window, or I stand on my balcony for a minute and just watch it because it still brings me the same hope. It still brings me the same feelings that the day is coming and that God is with me. These things are not abstract. The sun, the sky, the land, they all serve us. God made them and keeps them going. God has shown us that He is creating this home for us. We've moved from nothingness to darkness to shape into order. When God speaks, light, sky, and the land obey. God is so powerful, yes, but He's also close to us. Remember, He cares about us having vitamin D and the seasons, and He cares about the rhythm of our days. So I hope for a moment you can step outside today and you can look at the sky and feel the ground under your feet and notice the trees and the grass. These are ordinary things that sometimes we don't even think about. We know the sky is going to be there. We see the land that we're walking on and driving on. We know that the trees exist. But in these ordinary moments is when we have to stop and think. We have nothing to do with the land staying above the water. We have nothing to do with the sky staying where it is. We have nothing to do with the sun and the moon and the stars staying up there and not falling and plummeting to earth. There are vast amount of plants that no human has ever watered or fed or anything like that, but they still exist. And they exist because God not only created them, but keeps them going for us. We don't worry about any of that stuff. I don't ever sit there and go, oh man, I got to keep the sun in the sky. No, I just know it's there. And that's what God is showing us. He is powerful enough to keep these things going. And He wants us to be reminded of that when we see them. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Exploring the Bible with me. You can find this show wherever you get podcasts and share this episode with someone who needs a reminder of God's love and care for them. Next time, we'll watch as the animals come into this growing home of ours. But until next time, God bless.